Hello, and welcome back to Key Lights here in Princeton Community Television. I'm Misha.
I'm Jenny.
I'm Rachel.
And here with us today we have Maria Medrano Armington, who is a diversity consultant. To start us off, could you explain to us and our viewers what a diversity consultant is?
Okay. Well, my area is cultures, and basically we live in a very multicultural area and world. And so I help people understand one another and learn more about cultural differences in everyday life and at work and children in schools, because we learn differently in different countries and we are taught differently in different countries. And if we think of culture, we can talk about our family culture, where we do things a certain way, and neighborhoods that may do things a certain way and eat different foods and have different expressions, all that. And so I hear that you are learning Italian, and we are more familiar with Italians, especially here in New Jersey.
Definitely.
And we know about Italian food and some of the gestures, so it's fascinating. So basically I'm always learning about people and from people and trying to train to interact and enjoy different cultures, whether they are here for longer time, like an African American culture or Native American culture, or Czech or Italian or other cultures, and their ways of life, and what makes them truly special, what they contribute to our society.
So what specific work do you do at school?
Well, two different things. One is character building. So bring a diversity component, a cultures component to leadership training, for instance, but through activities, short activities that may be fun for kids. At times it's one activity after another, short, in the way of games, and so it can be how communication goes in a certain culture, and it may be just asking them to tell a story without words, so that they see how challenging it may be not to have the words to express themselves, and how they use other elements, and maybe their bodies, their facial expressions, their hands, whatever is at hand, to tell a story that may be interesting and full of emotions. So, and other language games, just to feel what it feels to be in a different culture, not knowing every word that everybody else in their school, in their neighborhood knows. Because if not, some people think that speaking a foreign language is something negative rather than positive.
How did you get started in this work?
I started studying English when I was little, like 11, and I'm still learning it, because you never finish learning a language, and I was always fascinated by cultures, and so I'm originally from Argentina, and my 4 grandparents were immigrants in Argentina, and they spoke other languages as well. One was Spanish, but then another one was Basque, and I know 2 words in Basque, and the other one was French, and the other one was a whistling language.
Wow.
From the Canary Islands. So you may know about yodeling and how people can communicate across a big distance with yodeling. In some other cultures with smoke signals. Well, it's the same in the Canary Islands that are gorges. So if one person is here and the other person is here and they try to communicate, whistling is the language they may use. And so, because whistling travels farther, and so kids over there are learning how to whistle to communicate. So it's like a second language.
What do you think is the most important thing about your job?
I would say creating a safe space for people to ask the questions they would really like to ask and not feel threatened. Sometimes when you have people who are from a minority opening up to say what they think or what they need to say in a certain circumstance may become a threat for other people who are not used to differences, and so there are gaps, there are misunderstandings, and so creating a safe space, let's say for people, adults or children from different cultures, so that they really listen to one another and understand the deep meaning of what the other person was saying. That safe space, that opportunity for people to open up and really share what hurts them, what offends them, what they expect from others, all those things that are not spoken about, and that force people from different cultures to function the way they are expected to behave, but not the way they would culturally act normally or daily. So in mainstream American culture, people from abroad learn to do things the American way. And some people may think that everybody should speak English, thinking that there is an official language in the US, and there's none. Our Constitution doesn't state that there is any official language. So our fellow citizens would be better off speaking many languages, and I know little ones who speak 3 languages when they're 3.5, 4 years old. And so, because biologically we are ready to learn 3 languages from the moment we are born. And so we forget about that, and science has shown that. So if we speak only one, if we never expand our horizons linguistically or through travel, we are limiting ourselves, and our brain can create 2 codes. Our heart can create different ways of feeling, we can think in another language. And so if we have 2 dictionaries in our minds, that's much richer. If we can function the way we are, personality-wise, in different cultures, then we will understand that others may feel differently, may think differently, may learn differently.
You mentioned that you were always interested in cultures, even from when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
So did you always know that you wanted to hold this position, or did you not know that something like this was something that you could do?
On my path, I discovered that I wanted to learn different things. And so because I was interested in different areas or disciplines, then I kept learning. So it was the path that led to my new interest, to learning about that and becoming a professional in that area. My soul wants to be a bridge among cultures. If I could sit everybody and help them to get along and understand and listen to one another, I would be in heaven. And so when I first came in Argentina, I was an English as a second language professor. When I came, I learned how to be an interpreter, like the ones in conferences. and I wanted to take simultaneous interpreting training to see if I was smart enough. And then when I finished and I got all A's in graduate school, I realized that it wasn't a question of intelligence, it was a question of practice and perseverance. And the university where I was doing my graduate work and teaching invited me to give training in cultural differences in business for a big corporation. So that's how I started doing it, and by now I've trained people from 75 countries, relocating to 25 countries. And the beauty of it is that I learned what is common to human beings and what is different, and you never finish learning that. So I'm more of a lifelong learner, and I'm fascinated by differences, by the gifts, the talents that we all have. Everybody's unique, and we were born to make a difference in the world somehow, and we need to discover that, and we need to open up the path for those differences to appear, and not be offended or by them or reject them, but accept them, welcome them, and share them. So like you ladies having this program, that's beautiful. So if you started doing this at age 11, imagine the sky's the limit, and opportunities will open up one after another, and we don't need to go in one direction. You know, the founders of our country here were astronomers, philosophers, attorneys, merchants, all these things. And so we have the potential to be so many more things. And so we, many people here have 2 or 3 careers in their lives. You started yours early, and I would be fascinated in 10 years seeing what you have become, what you have been able to do.
So you said you're still learning.
Oh,
so
yeah.
has there anything that stood out to you, or that's been so surprising to you while your journey in learning about these different cultures or teaching people?
What has stood out? I remember one of my clients, a bicultural American. He was an engineer in the automotive industry, and he was at first he was traveling to China on business for a long time, for many years, and then he moved there. And what he said to me was that he learned humility. He was from the south of the U.S. I believe he was Lebanese. His parents were Lebanese or from that area. And he said that he had learned humility in China when in the middle of the night he was at this very fancy restaurant with Chinese executives trying to do business outside the government's eyes, and the table had a very long tablecloth, almost all the way to the floor, and he sensed something touching his feet, and so he thought there would be rats, and he thought, here I'm eating here and there are rats right here, and then he kept on talking, and it happened again. And so he lifted the tablecloth a little bit, and he saw there was someone there on 4 feet cleaning people's shoes. So this person would go in the dark, polishing shoes, cleaning all these top executives' shoes. So he said, that's when I learned how much I was given in life, how many opportunities, how privileged I was, and because there was someone working in the dark, polishing my shoes. So lessons like that are transformative, I learn from. When someone tells me all these stories about themselves, about different countries, about their own culture, here when I learned the stories from African Americans, I heard a woman who's a historian here in Princeton saying that her great-grandfather was sold and his value as a slave, and his value was less than a piece of furniture. So, and that was a human life. So there's so much that needs to be shared to understand others. We need to sit down and listen and be humble. We're no better than anybody else. Our circumstances have been different, and we are privileged.
Wow. So I was curious. I hear that sometimes when people know more than one language, just the feeling of the language can kind of put them into like a different persona. Have you noticed that with people who, or with yourself, that know multiple languages, that you find yourself maybe saying things that you wouldn't normally say, or just being a little different?
When I was in graduate school in my bilingualism class, my professor had us read a research paper where an inmate in a murder case was interviewed, and he was interviewed in 2 different languages, and his statements were much clearer in one language than in the other. So in one, it was not clear that he had done it. In the other one, it was clear that he had killed someone. So we are different in different languages. And the daughter of a friend of mine was an exchange student in Germany, an American girl. And she called her father up and she said, "Dad, you know what? I don't have a personality in German. Not in Germany, in German. Because it is different. You learn a lot about that language, but about the culture, and you function within that culture's paradigms and ways of being and saying and doing. That's multiculturalism or biculturalism, so it's way beyond language. If you think of the Italian you're learning, and you think of Italian people, even within Italy, the south and the north, their populations are very different. They look different, and they are different. The northerners are maybe blonder and green-eyed and more like Swiss. And you think of the south, the whole Mediterranean area, how lively and more lively, more social, different. And we are global, and I'm an immigrant. Your ancestors are immigrants. Your mom is an immigrant. So I don't know how far back you trace your immigrant parents, ancestors from. Grandparents, great-grandparents?
Yeah. I'm not, I am Polish.
Okay.
So I go back to being Polish. But
Okay.
yeah.
So it's language, it's food,
Yeah.
it's relationship, and according to, especially our 3 ancestral cultures have a lot in common because they are very group-oriented. I don't know enough about Czech culture, but I know that our Polish, Spanish cultures are very group-oriented, very communicative, very together, very cohesive, and that we love sitting down with large groups of people generally. That's a trend. It's not that everybody's like that, but to share food and celebrate, whether it's a baptism or a bat mitzvah, whatever, but it's lots of food, and the more the merrier.
So do you specialize in any culture, like Argentina and the rest of South America, or in any culture you come across?
Over the years, of course, Latin American cultures was my first specialization, I would say. But over the years, having trained people coming and going, I have specialized in several countries, and I'm fascinated by the people I have the opportunity to train. So, when was it? Last week I trained someone a professional from Tanzania who grew up in Great Britain and was going to relocating to a country in Europe. So there's a flow. There are all these immigration waves that may be temporary, but that enrich and basically blend cultures. And so I always say that when we leave one culture or one country, we are like the core of an onion, and we develop new layers, new interests, new qualities, we acquire new skills. So the core of the onion is still there, but there are so many more layers. And the more we travel to different cultures, the more understanding we may become, and the bigger the heart may grow. We are willing to give people the benefit of the doubt much more.
Throughout your job, have you witnessed a lot of perhaps ethnocentrism in some of the people that you have, like, since doing your job? Have you noticed ethnocentrism in people more than you did before?
I would say it depends on the area where I lived. I lived in different states, and so there are stereotypes, and so people have different perceptions of those they don't know, and if they don't know them, they cannot understand them necessarily. I lived in a little town in Kansas called Independence, which had a community college and many international students. And that little town was very internationally minded. And it was a tiny town in southeast Kansas. And it was beautiful because there were a lot of exchange students. So families there brought into their homes to expose their children to global cultures. Kids from Korea, Japan, all over Africa, all over the world, Cyprus, Russia, and so it was beautiful. So because those South Koreans learned about Easter and had little baskets gathering eggs, and Thanksgiving dinners were huge. And so many things that if we remain open to differences, we become more as people, as human beings. We understand more. We may become more tolerant. If we never leave our home, we will be afraid of the neighbor. Because what monster can be out there? And in the heart, we all feel alike. We all have the same needs. And many people go to a different culture out of need because they need to feed their children. And so it's not that they want to steal from anybody. They just want to feed their children and give their children more opportunities that they themselves had. And I believe that just as my grandparents were immigrants in Argentina, I'm an immigrant here, and I'm trying to make a contribution. And if we open up to those differences, we will be a better society. And we won't impose on others, because I will want to learn how you do things and why do you do things. Every culture has its own internal logic. But unless we communicate and we are open to being challenged by other ideas, we will never understand and we will remain scared. So I wish every class, every kindergarten, were allowed to play games from around the world and try different words from around the world. And because there's a richness that being ethnocentric is lost, is killed. And I wish that all kids had that experience. And, the show and tell, but of different things. Games, songs, dances, literature, ways of thinking. We think differently around the world. And so the more ethnocentric you are, the more closed you are, the less permeable, the less porous you are to learning other things that are not wrong, they're different.
So do you have any last words for our audience out there?
Be open to differences. Talk to the neighbor who is different, whether they look different, they dress differently, they eat different flavors. Don't fear differences. Just welcome them. Be curious. Have them explain, ask questions to understand. And don't close the door of your heart, of your mind, or do not tighten your fists.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My
This
pleasure.
has been super inspirational and just
Thank you.
it means a lot, and
Yeah.
we all found it very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me here
Yeah.
and for meeting you. And go for it.
Thank you.